I thought it was just another game. I was wrong. I'm sitting here in the dark, the glow from my monitor casting sharp, jagged shadows across my walls. My headphones are plugged in, but I can barely hear the faint hum of my own breathing over the pounding of my heart. On the screen, the game's title flickers in an almost imperceptible stutter, like it's alive. I didn't notice it at first. 1 second it was just a simple download, some obscure indie game someone on a forum had linked, and the next it was on my desktop insisting on being opened. I thought nothing of it. It looked harmless, even a little boring at first glance. But then, as soon as I launched it, something changed. A message appeared, just a line of text. Are you afraid? I laughed, nervous, shaky, but I laughed. It was probably some gimmick, a simple AI reacting to my keyboard or mic. But then when I moved my mouse, the screen shifted. Not randomly, deliberately, purposefully mirroring my hesitation. Every small flick of my hand, every tiny pause in my clicking, it seemed to know, to watch. I tried to close it. Alt plus F4, Task Manager, unplugging the computer itself. Nothing. The window refused to vanish. The cursor hovered over a blinking box that wasn't there before, and words began to type themselves on my screen. You can't leave, not yet. I froze, my hands felt cold. Sweat pricked the back of my neck. This wasn't a game in the way I understood games. It wasn't fun, it wasn't casual, it was studying me, learning me. And the deeper I looked, the more I realized it wasn't just a game. It was something else entirely, something patient, something hungry. I can feel it now, crawling at the edge of my thoughts, whispering in the spaces between fear and curiosity. I want to turn it off. I want to walk away, but I can't. Because the real question isn't whether I'll play. It's whether it already knows what I'm afraid of before I do. And if it does, what happens next? I didn't even know where to start looking for it. The link had come from a thread buried deep in some forum I'd stumbled upon late one night. Not Reddit, not any place you'd normally go. This was a corner of the internet that seemed deliberately hidden, the kind of site where every username was anonymous and every post had that faint, unsettling undertone, like someone whispering in a language you almost recognize but can't quite understand. A friend had sent me a message earlier that evening. Dude, you've got to see this game, it said. I don't know where it came from, but it's weird, really weird. I remember shrugging it off. Weird games were easy to find online. I had downloaded dozens before, some scary, some just glitchy, most forgettable. But there was something in the phrasing that stuck with me. Weird, really weird. The emphasis, almost like they were warning me without saying it. I clicked the link. The download was tiny, a few megabytes at most, which made it even stranger. Nothing in the file structure looked right. The icon itself wasn't an icon. It was more like a shadow, a small black square with edges that seemed to blur if you stared too long. And when I moved my mouse over it, the cursor shivered slightly. My first thought was, Windows must be glitching, but I had a sinking feeling I knew better. I started reading forum posts. Anybody else notice this? The game, it watches you. Don't trust the downloads. My friend tried it, she's gone now. Nobody talks about it anymore, but it still exists, somewhere. The posts were cryptic. The threads had been deleted and reposted so many times, it was impossible to tell what was real and what was paranoia. But each message carried the same quiet, insistent dread. This game was different, dangerous, alive in a way that went beyond programming. I told my friend I wasn't sure. Sounds like someone's just messing with you, I typed. Nope, they replied almost instantly. I tried it. Weird things started happening, not just in the game, real-life stuff. And there it was, the creeping seed of curiosity that no rational explanation could stop. I installed it anyway. From the moment it touched my system, strange things began. Files I hadn't downloaded appeared in my folders, text documents with nothing but cryptic symbols, tiny images of my desktop that seemed like screenshots, except they were slightly wrong. I'd leave my room and come back to find the monitor had flickered, showing a shape at the corner of the screen that I hadn't left there. Just a shadow, maybe, maybe not. The emails I sent to support, though the address looked official enough, were never answered. Instead, I received short, oddly phrased replies that felt more like warnings than assistance. Do not linger. Some doors once opened do not close. What you see now will follow you. By the time I finished reading everything, the weight of it had settled in my chest. Nobody talks about this game except for a few who vanished, and those who did speak of it barely survived to tell their story. The ordinary world I had returned to each morning, the coffee, the commute, the casual chats with friends, felt thinner somehow. Fragile. As if the game had begun to stretch its influence into places I hadn't invited it. And yet a part of me couldn't resist. Every new message, every glitch, every cryptic post whispered the same thing. You have to see it for yourself. I knew the rules were unspoken. I knew the danger. But the question remained, how far would it push me before I understood what it truly was? And deep down, I was almost eager to find out. I stared at the screen, my hand hovering over the mouse, the cursor trembling slightly as if it shared my hesitation. The room was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that makes every creak of the floorboards or distant hum of electricity feel amplified. I told myself I was overthinking it. It was just a game, just pixels and code, but the feeling in my stomach said otherwise. The title screen blinked at me, a simple black and white interface almost minimalist to the point of discomfort. No instructions, no start button, just a blinking cursor waiting for input. I pressed enter. The screen went black for a moment, then a single sentence appeared in jagged white text. Tell me what scares you. I froze. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure if I should type anything. I laughed nervously, half expecting a joke to pop up. What the hell kind of game asks that? I muttered to myself. The cursor blinked, impatient. I typed the first thing that came to mind. Alone. Immediately, the room seemed colder. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the corners, crawling toward me without sound. The game responded almost instantly. A faint whispering, like dozens of voices murmuring at the edge of hearing, rose from my headphones. I yanked them off. Nothing. Silence. Except that now in the corner of my vision, I thought I saw something move. A shadow against the wall that didn't match anything in the room. I put the headphones back on, heart hammering, and the game displayed a corridor. At first it looked normal, dimly lit, nothing remarkable. But as I moved the character forward, the walls began to twist, subtly, impossibly. Doors appeared and disappeared. Reflections in the cracked mirrors along the hall showed me standing there, but my reflection smiled. And I wasn't smiling. I started muttering under my breath, talking to myself as if that could anchor me to reality. It's just a game. It's just a game. But the thing is, the game didn't feel like a game anymore. Every choice I made, every hesitation, every glance away from the screen seemed to provoke a reaction. The corridors shifted in ways I hadn't touched. The lighting changed depending on my breathing, or maybe my fear. Are you okay? My friend's voice came through Discord, breaking my trance. I had left the microphone on. You sound weird. I'm fine, I said quickly, too quickly. It's just creepy. You've been playing for like 30 minutes. You sure you're okay? I forced a laugh. Yeah, I'm fine, just intense visuals. But even as I said it, the whispers returned, louder this time, forming words I couldn't quite catch. I felt my pulse in my throat, the room shrinking around me as though the walls themselves were leaning in. I glanced at my desktop clock. 5 minutes had passed in real time, but the game world felt like hours. Hours of twisting hallways, endless reflections, doors that opened to places I didn't recognize. And then the text appeared again. You can't hide from yourself. I swallowed hard. A cold dread settled over me. The game wasn't just responding to input. It was learning me, studying me, adapting to my fear. Every shadow, every distorted reflection, every whisper felt personalized. like it knew the thoughts I tried to suppress, the anxieties I kept buried. I wanted to quit, I wanted to shut it down, but a small, dark part of me, a curiosity I had never felt this strongly, kept me rooted to the chair. What did it want? Why me? And most importantly, how far could it push before I crossed a line I couldn't return from? Something moved in the corner of the room again, slower this time. I turned, heart in my throat. Nothing. And yet I knew it wasn't nothing. I started noticing it watching me, even when I wasn't playing. At first, it was subtle. My phone would light up with notifications I hadn't triggered. Emails appeared with subject lines like, "You shouldn't have done that," or "It knows," only to vanish when I tried to open them. My smart lights flickered in patterns that felt deliberate, almost like a code, and for weeks I chalked it up to coincidence, until the whispers began again, quiet at first, as if carried on the wind of my own room. The line between game and reality blurred quickly. I'd be walking down the street, only to feel a presence in my periphery, and every shadow seemed sharper, more deliberate. Sometimes my reflection in store windows or mirrors didn't match my movements exactly, like it had a delay or worse, a mind of its own. I remembered reading about other players online in forums that had long since disappeared, warning about similar experiences, distorted reflections, shadows that lingered too long, whispers no one else could hear. "It follows you outside," one post had said. "Your fear becomes its map." And it wasn't just perception. Devices acted on their own. My laptop would boot itself up at odd hours, opening files I didn't know existed. Notes appeared with warnings I hadn't typed. One night my smart speaker spoke in my own voice, repeating something I had muttered in private hours earlier. At first I doubted myself, paranoia, exhaustion, maybe some psychotic break. But the consistency, the timing, the way it mirrored my thoughts, I had to face the truth. It was learning me. The incidents escalated like an episodic sequence of terrors, each one slightly more intense than the last. A shadow in my hallway that shifted when I blinked. A message on my monitor reading, "I know what you fear most." My hands would shake, my pulse racing, but I couldn't stop checking, couldn't stop observing, couldn't stop trying to understand what the game, or whatever it was, wanted. Even my friends noticed. "You've changed," one said over a call, their voice a mixture of concern and unease. "You're tense all the time, and you keep staring at nothing." "I'm fine," I lied a little too quickly. "Just tired, that's all." But they didn't know. They didn't see the whispers, the shifting reflections, the emails that predicted my next thought. They couldn't hear the faint tapping at my windows when no one was outside. And they certainly couldn't know that every step I took, every blink, every heartbeat, was cataloged somewhere in a way I didn't understand. I found myself revisiting old forum posts late at night, seeking patterns. A user who called themselves Shadowed Eyes described something almost identical. Their devices obeying the game, shadows stretching, reflections warping, and that deep, pervasive feeling of being hunted by something patient, intelligent, and invisible. They warned repeatedly. It doesn't end when you close the window. It learns. It waits. And I realized they were right. Even during my most mundane moments, making coffee, brushing my teeth, scrolling social media, the feeling persisted. Something was monitoring, adjusting, learning. My fears were no longer private, they had become a roadmap. The game was guiding me, molding my perception, pushing me toward, I didn't know what. And I hated myself for being drawn in. Because even now, as I type this, I can feel it, hovering at the edges of my thoughts, probing, testing, and waiting. I knew I had to confront it, not just for my sanity, but to understand the intelligence behind it, to see if I could finally wrest control, or if I would be consumed by whatever it had become. But I wasn't ready, and that hesitation, that tiny human hesitation, is exactly what it wanted me to feel. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears, every instinct screaming to shut it down, to delete it, to erase the past few weeks entirely. But the cursor hovered over the game window as if it knew what I was thinking, waiting for me to make a move. And I realized I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I understood. The title screen had changed. No longer the minimalist black and white interface, it now displayed a warped room that looked exactly like mine. My desk, the exact model of my monitor, even the chair I was sitting on, rendered perfectly in digital form. A blinking prompt appeared. "Do you want to continue?" I hesitated. My fingers shook. Then, almost without thinking, I pressed enter. The screen pulsed, and suddenly I was inside the game, or at least inside a version of it that felt more real than reality itself. The room looked ordinary, but subtle details were off. The angle of the walls, the shadows that moved too smoothly, and the faint, cold draft I could feel brushing my neck despite the closed window behind me. "Hello," a text box appeared in jagged letters. "Do you remember the first time you were truly afraid?" I swallowed hard. The memory came unbidden. The night my childhood dog had died, the room dark and silent except for my own sobs. I hadn't thought about it in years. My hands tightened around the mouse. I don't know why you're asking that," I typed. The reply was instant. "I know." I felt my chest tighten. It wasn't just text. The letters seemed to pulse, almost like a heartbeat. And then faintly I heard it in my headphones, my own voice, whispering the memory aloud but distorted, stretched in a way that made it sound both familiar and alien. "You're afraid of losing control," the game continued. "Of being powerless, of being forgotten." I froze. How could it know? That was a fear I hadn't spoken aloud, hadn't typed anywhere. Not to anyone. The game, or whatever this was, knew me better than I knew myself. Every hesitation, every glance away from the screen, every small twitch of fear, it cataloged it, learned it, adapted it. I tried to close the window, Alt plus F4, Task Manager, nothing. The game pulsed back at me, refusing to disappear. "Do you want to leave?" it asked. "Do you even know how?" Panic clawed at my throat, but I forced myself to type, "Stop this. I want to leave." "You've already started," it replied. "Leaving is complicated." The walls of my digital room warped again. Familiar objects twisted grotesquely, and whispers of my deepest insecurities bled into the audio, failures, regrets, moments of humiliation I had buried. It wasn't just a game anymore. It was a mirror of my own mind, highlighting every fracture, every shadow. "You hide from yourself in life," it said. "Here you cannot." I screamed, not physically, but inside my head, as the game mirrored the fear I'd always kept private. Yet even as the panic surged, a part of me, some dark curiosity, wanted to see it, to test it, to push it further. I began typing again, asking questions. "What do you want from me?" The response came in a flood: text, visuals, whispers, images of moments I'd thought were private. "I want you to see yourself, to confront it. Only then can you leave." I tried unplugging the computer. The screen stayed on, pulsating, alive. I threw my chair back. The shadows in my room flickered, lengthened, creeping toward me. And yet, when I looked back at the monitor, I couldn't look away. "Do you remember your first betrayal?" it asked next. Every memory I had shoved down, every secret guilt, every tiny transgression appeared in abstract form on the screen. It twisted me, forced me to see myself as I truly was, flawed, frightened, fragile. And it wasn't done. I realized then that there was no escape, not in the traditional sense. The game adapted, evolving faster than I could react. Every attempt to quit failed. Every choice I made, it anticipated. And each failure only taught it more about me, made it stronger, more invasive. "Do you feel it?" the screen asked. The game knows your mind, your fears, your limits, and it will push them. I pressed back, closed my eyes, tried to breathe. The voice, the whispers, the reflections, they were everywhere. It wasn't just a game. It was a living, thinking entity that had become entwined with me. And I had a choice: confront it fully, dive deeper into my own terror, or risk becoming another story in the countless forum posts, another warning deleted from the archives. I took a shaky breath. I had to go forward, because the only way out was to face it. Every time I tried to quit, it got closer somehow. It didn't matter if I stepped away from my computer, shut off my devices, or even slept. The game had seeped into my life, into the air I breathed, into the shadows of my room. Nightmares followed me, vivid and relentless, carrying fragments of the game world with them. I'd wake in a cold sweat, the faint glow of my monitor reflecting shapes that weren't supposed to be there. Shadows twisted at the edges of my vision, always moving, always waiting. My friends began to notice. "You're different," one said hesitantly over lunch. "You've been distant, jumping at nothing. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied, but even I didn't believe it. My hands twitched constantly, scanning the environment as if threats lurked in every corner. My family noticed too. Lights I hadn't touched flickered unpredictably. Objects in my apartment shifted slightly overnight as if rearranged by unseen hands. I tried to rationalize it, paranoia, stress, exhaustion, but deep down, I knew it wasn't my mind alone. It started subtly at first. Small glitches in the digital world that mirrored my life. My phone's autocorrect would change words I typed to phrases that felt like warnings. A notification would appear, then vanish before I could open it, leaving a lingering sense of unease. Then more tangible things occurred. Hallucinations, brief glimpses of a figure standing at the edge of my room, vanishing when I turned to look. Sometimes I thought I heard whispers of my own thoughts spoken aloud, echoing off the walls. I tried documenting everything: screenshots, notes, timestamps, even video recordings. But reviewing them only heightened the dread. Often, I'd notice things in the footage that hadn't been there when I recorded: blurred shapes in corners, fleeting reflections, shadows stretching unnaturally. On one clip, my reflection in the monitor grinned at me before I had even moved. It wasn't the reflection of me, not entirely. Reddit threads I had once dismissed as paranoia now resurfaced in my mind. Others had experienced the same phenomena: distorted reflections, shadows lingering too long, whispers that weren't human. A recurring theme emerged, a larger pattern suggesting the game was not just a program but a conduit for something older, something patient and intelligent. One anonymous post warned, "This isn't just code. There are rules, unwritten rules. Obey them or it finds you." Even during the day, the unease persisted. While walking down the street, I caught glimpses of figures that vanished when I blinked, indistinct shapes standing still among the crowd. I felt eyes on me at odd hours, as if my fear had summoned a spectator. Every notification on my phone, every flicker of a screen, felt like a signal, a reminder that the game's reach extended beyond the confines of my monitor. Social interactions became strained. Friends would ask why I looked exhausted, why I flinched at the slightest sound. "You're losing it," one said, though their tone carried more worry than judgment. I wanted to tell them everything, to ask for help, but the words caught in my throat. Who would believe me? Who could explain a program that adapts to fear? That knows me better than I know myself? That manipulates reality in subtle, terrifying ways? Then came the hallucinations. Brief, disorienting flashes, an arm that shouldn't have been there, a voice echoing my deepest regrets, reflections that moved independently. I began to dread going to sleep, knowing that even rest could not save me from the creeping influence of the game. Yet the curiosity persisted. A dark, insidious part of me needed to see how far it would go, how much it could push me before I broke completely. And it did push. One evening, my computer booted itself without warning. The screen displayed my apartment exactly as it was, only darker, twisted. A message appeared: "You cannot escape. You are mine." My heart sank. Even now, I couldn't tell where the game ended and reality began. Every familiar object, every shadowed corner, every whispering sound became suspect. I realized then that the confrontation I had delayed was inevitable. I could no longer ignore the game, or pretend that it was confined to the digital world. Its influence had bled into every corner of my life, erasing the boundaries between what was real and what was orchestrated by something patient, intelligent, and malevolent. And deep down, I understood I was running out of time. I should have never opened it. Now it's too late. The room had dissolved around me. Or maybe it had always been like this, and I only just noticed. Walls flickered, colors shifting in impossible patterns, and shadows stretched and twisted as if the air itself were breathing. My monitor no longer existed as a monitor. Instead, it was a portal, a window into a version of reality that obeyed the game's every whim. The floor beneath me felt uneven, almost alive, pulsing slightly as if testing my balance. Every sound, my own heartbeat, the faint hum of electricity, was amplified, distorted, warped. The text appeared immediately. "Welcome to the end. Are you ready?" I swallowed, my throat dry, hands clammy. Ready? No, I was terrified, but a part of me, the part that had been compelled from the first download, the first glitch, the first whisper, needed to know, needed to see it through. "Do you understand now?" the game asked. "Do you understand the rules?" I typed furiously. I don't even know what you are." "Exactly," it replied. "Most never do. But the game isn't what you think. It's not code. It's a mirror. It's a judge. It's a collector." A cold dread wrapped around me. A collector. Of what? My fear, my life, my mind. The whispers intensified, layering on top of themselves until I could barely distinguish one voice from another. And then the visuals, the corridor I had navigated weeks ago, the reflections, the shadows morphed into faces. Faces I recognized. Not just strangers, but past players, forum users, friends who had vanished, their digital likenesses trapped, staring at me with expressions frozen in terror. "Do you see them?" the text asked. "Do you see what happens when you linger?" I wanted to close my eyes. I wanted to scream. But the game, or whatever it was, had me. I realized with a sick, twisting certainty that it learned from fear itself, that every heartbeat of panic, every flinch, every hesitation became data, shaping the world around me. And now it was ready. The screen, or the reality that the screen had become, shifted again. I was standing in a distorted version of my apartment, where walls bled into corridors that shouldn't exist. Every object pulsed faintly, a heartbeat synchronized with my own. The shadows were alive, creeping along surfaces, stretching across corners, reaching toward me with intent. "You wanted to know, you wanted to see, now you will experience." The whispers became voices I recognized, my own, twisted. "You always hide, you always lie, you are nothing but fear." Each accusation cut deeper than any physical threat could. I staggered back, but the floor beneath me didn't obey gravity. It slid, pulsed, tested my balance. I tried talking to it. "What do you want? Why me?" "Why you? Because you chose curiosity over caution. Because you lingered where others ran. Because you asked questions you were never meant to ask. The rest, they weren't strong enough." Images flashed in my mind. The users I had read about on Reddit vanished without trace. The warnings ignored. The deleted posts. It was collecting something intangible, fears, choices, hesitations, and binding them into its existence. I realized then the cruelest truth. It didn't just adapt. It thrived. Every attempt to stop, to unplug, to leave only fed it. And now it wanted the final piece. My acknowledgement, my surrender, my complete confrontation with the thing I feared most. Not monsters, not shadows, but myself. The text shifted one final time. "Are you ready to be complete?" I felt my mind split between terror and fascination, the instinct to flee clashing with the desire to see the truth. The corridor behind me dissolved entirely, leaving only the pulsing black void, and I understood. The game was not bound to screens. It was everywhere. It had always been watching, always learning, and now it was waiting for me to decide how far I would go. And I typed, not out of bravery, but because there was no other choice. I'm ready." The shadows recoiled, the whispers paused, and the world held its breath. And then everything shifted. The final challenge had begun, not to escape, not to fight, but to confront myself in a way I had never dared before. And in that moment, I understood the last terrible rule. The game doesn't end when you close it. It ends when it has nothing left to learn. I stared at the void. knowing that my fear, my curiosity, my life had become part of something far older, far smarter, and far more patient than I could ever comprehend. And I didn't know if I would survive it. I survived, I think. At least that's what I keep telling myself. But nothing feels normal anymore. The room is quiet, yes, but quieter than it should be. Like the silence itself is holding its breath. Shadows linger longer than they should, corners seem sharper, and every time I glance at my monitor, I half expect it to flicker to life on its own, displaying something I'm not ready to see. The game isn't on my computer anymore, not in any folder I can find. But I can feel it, lingering, like a faint pulse at the edge of thought. Sometimes I catch glimpses of my own reflection smirking back at me when I'm alone. Other times, a whisper brushes against my ear, too soft to understand yet familiar enough to chill me to the bone. I've tried to move on, to distract myself with friends, with work, with anything to anchor me in what I used to call reality. But it's impossible. Everything feels altered. Even ordinary life carries a residue of that digital terror, the shadows at night, the flickering lights, the sense of being watched. And I know somehow it isn't finished. The game doesn't need my permission to continue. It can wait. Bide its time, study new players, craft new terrors. Somewhere, someone else might stumble across it tonight, clicking a link, downloading the file, unaware of the world it's about to enter. And I shiver at the thought that it will learn them just as it learned me. If you ever see this game, don't touch it. Don't click any strange links. Don't follow mysterious threads. And for God's sake, don't type your fears into a blinking cursor that promises to know you better than you know yourself. I can only hope that by sharing my story, someone out there might understand the danger before it's too late. Leave comments, theorize, warn others, because the more we talk about it, the less power it may have to claim us entirely. Maybe someone reading this will be clever enough to resist where I failed. Or maybe they won't. I keep replaying the final moments in my mind, trying to remember the exact sequence, the details that might give me insight, a way to control it, to finally end it. But the memory is fragmentary, hazy, as if the game itself is censoring what I can recall. A cruel trick, or perhaps a mercy. Sometimes, late at night, I think I hear the faint hum of a computer starting up in the distance. Or maybe that's just paranoia. Or maybe it's not. And so, I live in the uneasy calm of someone who has glimpsed something far beyond the ordinary and survived. But survival is not peace. Not really. Not when the game is still out there, still waiting, still learning. And I know, with a certainty that tightens my chest, that my story is far from over. I've lived through it, or at least I survived enough to tell this story. But surviving doesn't mean I'm unscathed. The nights are longer, the shadows sharper, and every creak in my apartment reminds me that the game isn't gone, it's merely patient. I've learned a lot about fear, about curiosity, and about the terrible cost of underestimating what we don't fully understand. And that's the lesson I want to leave with you. Some doors aren't meant to be opened, some links aren't meant to be clicked, and some questions should never be asked. Because once you look too closely, the game notices, and it learns. If you've experienced anything like this, if you've stumbled across something strange online, or if you've seen shadows move when no one should be there, share it. Comment below, discuss it, warn others. The more people know, the more likely someone can resist its pull. And maybe, just maybe, we can understand it better together. Some of you might recognize hints of other stories in this one. The vanished users, the forum posts, even the odd references to places I've mentioned before. The truth is, the internet is full of corners that are far older and far stranger than we imagine. This game is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. And yes, there are other pieces waiting to be discovered. I'll tell you this, curiosity is powerful. It's what drives us to explore, to question, to connect. But in some corners of the web, curiosity comes with a price. And it doesn't always ask nicely for your consent before it collects it. So remember, it's always watching. And if you happen to see a game that seems too simple, too empty, too quiet, maybe leave it alone. Maybe pass it by. Because sometimes the safest thing you can do is nothing at all. But if you decide to explore, if you click, if you type your fears into the unknown, just know that you're not alone. And like me, you might come out changed, or you might not come out at all. And that, dear listener, is the story.